Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Harmith with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Pakistan says India's policies based on Hindutva ideology have threatened peace and stability of the entire region. Foreign Minister Qureshi said this during a consultative meeting about regional security in Islamabad. Qureshi expressed deep concern over the brutalities by Indian forces in occupied Jammu and Kashmir amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The Indian occupying forces have martyred 3 civilians and injured another in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The youths were targeted during a cordon and search operation in the Pulwama district. Meanwhile, a vehicle of Indian forces has trampled an elderly man to death in the Kulgam district. In another incident, 4 civilians were injured in a grenade blast in Singhpura area of the Baramulla district. The United States Supreme Court has dismissed Trump's campaign's lawsuit seeking to throw out up to 2.5 million mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania. The court refused to block the state from formalizing President-elect Joe Biden's win. The lawsuit argued that Pennsylvania's 2019 expansion of mail-in voting was illegal under state law. The global number of coronavirus cases has topped 68 million, while the death toll has surged to 1.5 million. The infections tally in the United States has crossed 15 million, with over 286,000 deaths. In India, the virus has claimed more than 141,000 lives and infected over 9.74 million people. Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported nearly 3,000 new cases and 60 deaths in a day, with the tally crossing 8,500. And in football, Juventus have outclassed Barcelona 3-0 in their UEFA Champions League encounter at Camp Nou. Cristiano Ronaldo scored a brace to put his club in the top spot of Group G. And these were the headlines. News is coming in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. Pakistan says India's policies based on Hindutva ideology have threatened peace and stability of the entire region. Foreign Minister Qureshi said this during a consultative meeting about regional security in Islamabad. Qureshi said Pakistan has presented undeniable evidence before the world through the dossier on Indian terrorism inside Pakistan. He also expressed deep concern over the brutalities by Indian forces in occupied Jammu and Kashmir amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The foreign minister said peace and stability in Afghanistan is imperative for the entire region. He said Pakistan will continue playing its reconciliatory role for peace in the region, including Afghanistan. Moving on, the Indian occupying forces have martyred 3 civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The youths were targeted during a cordon and search operation in the Pulwama district. 1 person was also injured due to the firing of the occupying troops during the so-called search operation. The operation continued till last reports came in. Meanwhile, a vehicle of Indian forces has trampled an elderly man to death in the Kulgam district. In another incident, 4 civilians were injured in a grenade blast in the Singhpura area of the Baramulla district. Pakistan's foreign minister says Islamabad lauds Riyadh's peaceful efforts for the resolution of conflicts in the Gulf region. Qureshi said this during a meeting with Saudi Ambassador Nawaf bin Saeed Al Malki in Islamabad. Qureshi said Pakistan welcomes Saudi Arabia's support to the resolution on Kashmir and Islamophobia at the OIC's meeting in Niamey. He also thanked Ambassador Malki for Saudi Arabia's support to Pakistan at the Financial Action Task Force. The foreign minister said Pakistani diaspora is playing a pivotal role in Saudi Arabia's development for decades. Qureshi said Islamabad is looking forward towards holding of Pak-Saudi Supreme Coordination Council meeting in Riyadh in 2021. He said there's room for strengthening cooperation between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia in multiple sectors. Now, the Saudi-led military coalition says it has destroyed an explosive laden drone launched by Yemen's Houthi rebels. Saudi media quoted a coalition spokesperson as saying that the drone was aimed at the kingdom's civilian population. Cross-border attacks by Yemeni rebels have escalated since May, when a truce prompted by the coronavirus pandemic expired. Last month, Houthi rebels targeted a petroleum product domestic distribution facility in Jeddah. In 2015, the Arab coalition intervened in Yemen after the Houthis ousted the internationally recognized government from Sana'a. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's leading rival inside his ruling party has announced to part ways from the government. In a statement, Gideon Sa'ar said he is forming his own political party. Gideon Sa'ar said he cannot serve under Netanyahu any longer and will seek the Prime Minister's post for himself. Sa'ar said Netanyahu mismanaged the health and economic crisis stemming from the coronavirus pandemic. He said Netanyahu turned the ruling party Likud into a tool for personal survival at a time when he is on trial for corruption charges. Now, this comes after the Knesset passed a bill to dissolve the parliament, which would end Netanyahu's government. Moving on, the U.S. Supreme Court has dismissed Trump's campaign's lawsuit seeking to throw out up to 2.5 million mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania. The court refused to block the state from formalizing President-elect Joe Biden's win. The lawsuit argued that Pennsylvania's 2019 expansion of mail-in voting was illegal under state law. Meanwhile, U.S. President-elect Joe Biden has unveiled his health team to take on the gigantic task of battling COVID-19. In a press conference in Delaware, Biden named California Attorney General Xavier Becerra as his health secretary. He nominated Rochelle Walensky as the head of Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Among his other aides will be Dr. Anthony Fauci as chief COVID medical advisor. Now, the United States has imposed terrorism-related sanctions on Iran's ambassador to the Houthi rebels in Yemen. The Treasury Department said Hassan Irlu works for the overseas wing of Iran's Revolutionary Guard. Iran's Al-Mustafa International University was also targeted with sanctions for serving as a platform for Quds Force operations. Iran announced Irlu's arrival in Yemen's Houthi-controlled capital Sana'a in October. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the appointment signals Iran's intent to ramp up support to the Houthis. He said this will further complicate international efforts to reach a negotiated settlement to the conflict. Meanwhile, Iran also says its security services have arrested some individuals involved in the assassination of the country's top nuclear scientist. In an interview, an advisor to Iranian parliament speaker said the perpetrators will not escape justice. He said Israel couldn't kill Mohsen Fakhrizadeh in Tehran without the help of U.S. intelligence. Earlier, Iranian officials claimed that satellite-guided equipment was used in the assassination of Fakhrizadeh. Iran has blamed Israel for the killing of the alleged mastermind of Tehran's covert nuclear weapons program. Meanwhile, Israel is yet to comment on the allegations. Now moving to Iraq, where the death toll in the protests against Kurdish authorities has risen to 6. People have taken to the streets against delayed public sector salary payments and pay cuts. The rallies broke out last week in the town of Suleimania. The regional government of Kurdistan has announced a 24-hour travel ban throughout the city, as protesters try to set a police station on fire. The UN office in Iraq condemned the violence and urged the perpetrators to be held accountable. Now, Indonesians, mostly in PPEs, are voting to elect local and regional leaders across 270 regions of the archipelago. One-third of the country's population, comprising over 100 million people, is eligible to vote. Voters will also choose governors in 9 out of the country's 34 provinces. The polls are being held amid the most severe outbreak of COVID-19 in a Southeast Asian country. There is a surge in interest in this year's elections as several candidates come from political families. President Joko Widodo's son and son-in-law are also running for mayor in the cities of Surakarta and Medan. More news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. The global number of coronavirus cases has topped 68 million, while the death toll has surged to 1.55 million. The infection tally in the United States has crossed 15 million with over 286,000 deaths. More on coronavirus in this report.
As the world moves one step closer to administering a COVID-19 vaccine, cases and deaths continue to spike to record highs. Countries are pouring in billions of dollars to become one of the first nations to immunize their populations. Brazil continues to register record high daily deaths every day. The Latin American state signed a letter of intent to procure 70 million doses of Pfizer vaccine, while Mexico is also set to buy 22 million doses from Johnson & Johnson. As cases in Arizona, Alabama, and Ohio skyrocket, the upcoming U.S. administration has introduced a mass vaccination distribution program.
This team will help get at the last 100 million COVID-19 vaccine, at least 100 million COVID vaccine shots into the arms of the American people in the first 100 days. 100 million shots in the first 100 days.
However, an international coalition called the People's Vaccine Alliance claims 9 out of 10 people in poor nations can miss out on vaccination because rich countries, home to only 14% of the global population, have hoarded 53% of the total stock of vaccines. Experts say vaccine deployments on nationalistic sentiments can have negative global consequences.
I think also we can't be nationalistic about it because the UK has bought lots of vaccines. We have a great capacity to immunise people. But, if other countries around the world are still crippled from their health systems and economically, that affects us as well. It affects our economy and the health of our population. So we do have work to do on that.
Meanwhile, in India, the virus has claimed more than 141,000 lives and infected over 9.74 million people. Indian officials say if the vaccines are approved over the next few weeks, an estimated 300 million people will be inoculated in the first tranche. Over in South Korea, the Disease Control and Prevention Agency has reported 868 new infections, which is the second highest number of cases in one day.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 60 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, pushing the death toll to 8,547. The Health Ministry says nearly 3,000 people tested positive for the virus overnight. The ministry said there are more than 45,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. It said out of more than 426,000 countrywide infections, over 372,000 people have recovered. While Minister for Planning and Development Asad Umar says the vaccine will be available in the country in the first quarter of 2021. Umar said it would be provided to health workers and old citizens on a priority basis. Now in India, health officers found excessive amounts of lead and nickel in blood samples of patients of a mysterious illness in Andhra Pradesh. At least one person has died. Research by the All India Institute of Medical Sciences team said traces of metals may be the culprit, but public health officials are still searching for a definitive link between all patients. The state's chief minister says out of 505 people to have been hospitalized, 300 people have been discharged. Patients reported a range of symptoms including seizures, loss of consciousness and nausea. Over in Latin America, President Nicolas Maduro says United States President Donald Trump sought contact with Venezuelan officials early in his term. Talking to the media, Maduro said the then foreign minister was invited to Trump's inauguration in 2017. Maduro said later in 2018, a Trump intermediary invited him to a meeting with President Trump during the UN General Assembly. He accused the U.S. establishment of preventing the meeting, saying he was willing to meet. Maduro expressed hope to establish a dialogue with the incoming U.S. administration.
We hope that once the new government of Joe Biden is installed, that they have time to think, and we hope they are open to the possibility of dialogue between Venezuela and the United States.
Now, UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson will fly to Brussels today for talks with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The two sides are making last-ditch efforts to reach a post-Brexit trade deal. The pair will hold talks over dinner after negotiations between officials ended in a deadlock. Major disagreements remain on fishing rights, business competition rules and how a deal will be policed. Earlier, the EU's chief negotiator Michel Barnier told ministers he believed a no-deal scenario was now more likely than an agreement. Deepening the gloom, Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin said unless there was a breakthrough soon, European Union leaders would have to discuss contingency plans for the economic disruption a no-deal would bring. Meanwhile, France says its next-generation aircraft carrier will be nuclear-powered. President Emmanuel Macron said the new carrier will replace the national fleet's flagship warship Charles de Gaulle in 2038. During his visit to a nuclear sector components maker, Macron said the country's strategic future lied with the nuclear industry. Defense Ministry says the carrier vessel will be equipped with a new electromagnetic aircraft launch system. The carrier will be 300 meters long and have a dead weight of 75,000 tons. The Ministry of Armed Forces said France will invest €1 billion during the first development phase that will end in 2025. Pakistan's Navy is celebrating the 49th Hangar Day with zeal. The day pays homage to veteran warriors who outflanked Indian ships in 1971. Led by Commander Ahmed Tasneem, Pakistan submarine Hangar sank the Indian Navy's INS Khukri during the Indo-Pak War. It then safely returned with the crew to Karachi despite Indian Navy hunting. To date, it is hailed as the only conventional submarine in the world to outmaneuver a frigate after World War II. The Pakistan Army saluted the crew and commander of the ship for their heroism in the war. Now, 4 Pakistanis have made their mark on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list for North America. The list recognizes 30 most brilliant young leaders in 20 different fields. They were shortlisted from among 600 young game changers. The list includes CEO of Jadoo augmented reality application Asad Malik and program manager at Google Sana Khan. It also recognized Danish Dhamani, who is the co-founder of Arai, a speech app, and Faizan Bhatti, who co-founded Hello Cars with Ken and Saleh. Forbes says these 30 trailblazers have raised over $1 billion in venture funding. The International Anti-Corruption Day is being observed today across the world. In a statement, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the COVID-19 crisis has created additional opportunities for corruption.
The United Nations Secretary General said the development of vaccines and anti-COVID-19 treatments adds to the risk of bribery and profiteering. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the National Accountability Bureau has been running a week-long awareness campaign to eradicate corruption from the country. Prime Minister Imran Khan has been spearheading an anti-corruption drive in the country since day one in office. The Prime Minister has also been highly vocal against money laundering by corrupt elites from poor to rich states. In a tweet, Khan says developing countries being impoverished by their corrupt elite who launder money to richer countries and offshore tax havens. The Prime Minister says he welcomes US President-elect Biden's declared intent of a policy targeting dirty money. Khan has also established an assets recovery unit in the PM office in Islamabad to retrieve monies or hidden assets overseas. Moreover, a law to facilitate and reward whistleblowers to report corruption and bribery has also been introduced. The UN General Assembly adopted the Convention Against Corruption in 2003, while in December 2005, Assembly designated the day as Anti-Corruption Day.
Now, New Zealand is marking 1 year to the White Island disaster. 22 people, mostly tourists, were killed in the volcanic eruption last year. Details in this report.
For the families of the victims of White Island eruption, the last 1 year has been littered with painful milestones. Community leaders gathered in Whakatane, a town of the Bay of Plenty, to mark the anniversary. Survivors, families of the dead, first responders and residents observed a minute of silence.
We also remember our survivors and pray for their healing. For many, this will be a long journey back to good health. And though the scars on your skin may have begun to heal, it will take longer for our hearts and minds to heal. We offer you our love and support.
Earlier, the country's primary regulator indicted 13 parties for not meeting safety obligations in taking tourists to the island. Whakatane Mayor Judy Turner recalled Prime Minister Ardern's remarks.
We'll remember those who have passed. We will think of the survivors, thank those who were responders, acknowledge those who continue to care for and support the injured, and we will recognise the pain and suffering that still exists.
Tourists have not been back to the island since.
Now, in the UK, the Royal Mint has quite literally launched a commemorative coin celebrating the career of David Bowie. One of the most influential musicians of his era, Bowie died of cancer in 2016, aged 69. Details in this report.
David Bowie, the infinitely changeable songwriter who created trend-setting pop personas like Ziggy Stardust, passed away in 2016. But his legacy lives on. In a fitting tribute to the man who gave us Space Oddity, the Royal Mint launched a commemorative coin into space this October. The coin was carried by a balloon to an altitude of 35,000 meters before descending back to Britain. The design was inspired by a photo of Bowie taken during his Berlin years and features his iconic lightning bolt motif. The Bowie coin is the third release in the Royal Mint's Music Legends collection. It follows similar coins in honor of Queen and Elton John. The coin, the first UK coin to be sent to space, will be offered as a competition prize via the Royal Mint's Facebook page.
Well, it may be strange days indeed, but the world has gathered to celebrate the life and music of John Lennon in New York 40 years after his death. Details in this report.
Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do.
John Lennon has achieved a kind of deific immortality with his life and work being romanticized and rehashed since his death. Lennon's songs, including Working Class Hero and Mind Games, highlighted the class warfare and socio-economic injustices built into the modern society. He believed the greed and lust for power had driven the world insane.
All our society is run by insane people for insane objectives. You know, and I think that's what I sussed when I was 16 and 12 way down the line, but I expressed it differently all through my life.
Lennon's fame and admiration stands unparalleled since the Beatles, even 40 years after his assassination anniversary. He spent his last days with wife Yoko Ono in nearby Dakota apartments, where he was shot 4 decades ago by a borderline psychotic to achieve self-glory. That's where he wrote his legendary Give Peace a Chance.
Every country's had a violent revolution for one reason or the other. Not one of them has the freedom we're all talking about. So we're saying give peace a chance, you know, like nobody's ever done it before. And it's not a matter of, we're not thinking in terms of 10 years, we're thinking in terms of peace forever, you know.
On the eve of 8th December 1980, at the age of 40, John Lennon was shot dead in the archway of his residence. He has a dedicated spot in New York's Central Park called Strawberry Fields, marked with a permanent plaque that reads, imagine. His fans across the globe and gun control law advocates in the US continue to advocate his views to this day.
Now, Britain says it will suspend retaliatory tariffs imposed on US goods. The Trade Department said the move was an attempt to de-escalate conflict between US and EU on subsidies for aircraft manufacturers. In a statement, Trade Minister Liz Truss said Britain wanted a negotiated settlement to the conflict. He said London is ready to deepen its trading relations with Washington. He added separate tariffs on US goods relating to a row over steel and aluminium would remain in place after January 1st. The move marks UK's divergence from the EU trade policy and ambition to forge closer ties with the United States. But London warned it could reimpose the sanctions if an agreeable settlement was not reached. Class Barcelona 3-0 in their UEFA Champions League encounter at Camp Nou. The defeat is Barcelona's first in a group fixture since 2016.
Cristiano Ronaldo scored a brace to put his club in the top spot of Group G. In a Group H fixture, RB Leipzig beat Manchester United 3-2, knocking Man U out of the tournament. Angelino, Amadou Haidara and Justin Kluivert scored one each for the Germans. In a Group E match, Chelsea drew Krasnodar 1-1 to remain atop the group with 14 points. Meanwhile, the Paris Saint-Germain and Istanbul Başakşehir encounter was rescheduled for today after the fourth official accused of racism. Players from PSG and Istanbul Başakşehir left the pitch in the 23rd minute following an incident of racism by the fourth official, Sebastian. UEFA has announced a thorough investigation.
And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.